checking you out. You've met Ken in the grocery store where he's the cashier extraordinaire. Ken's talk is reflections in a house of mirrors, and he tells us that success has very little to teach us in the spiritual life, but failures and fiascos are great teachers, according to Richard Rohr. Please welcome Ken and Cathey.
Is that on? Oh. You know, this is really exciting for me. Is this too loud? Isn't it too loud? I talk with a loud voice. There. Is that better? All right. Well, I'm really excited to be here. This is going to be fun for me. Maybe not so much for you guys, but fun for me. You know, this is about spiritual evolution, and I could go one of two ways. I can tell you about what spiritual evolution means, you know, or I can tell you about me and my spiritual evolution journey. So I chose that part. I chose to go in that way. And I wrote a little story then. And I just wanted you to, for me, see the difference between knowing God and knowing about God. And so the title of my talk is Reflections in a House of Mirrors. I told that to the people in the course the other day, and they looked at me with dumbfounded look. And I realized, well, they didn't know what that meant. So I'm going to ask you guys, has anybody here been at the fun house at the fair and gone through a house of mirrors? Yeah, so you all know what this is, right? Okay. Well, it's a maze of mirrors that keep you from finding the path that leads you to the way out. And that's what all the mirrors are about. And that is my objective for today. Am I going in and out? Down? Yeah. Okay. So here's the story. I recently had a memory I hadn't thought of in years, and it was about me in the 3rd grade, and I was a tetherball champion. And I imagined that my grandma sewed me a sequined costume, for my reign as, and I put this sequin costume under an old robe, and I went to school, and they all laughed at me, and I waited my turn, then it was my turn, and I took off this robe, and there I was in all my sparkly splendor, and they were just in awe. And that was my imagining. Now, I tell you this story because I don't want to show you my sparkly costume. And I don't want to show you my ratty old robe. But I just want you to be able to see me. And to stop. I've got a little exercise for you. If you would close your eyes, no beating, no, and think about the word patience. That's a good word. Think about what it means to you. Feel it. Okay? Now I'm going to tell you, keep your eyes closed, and I'm going to tell you my definition of patience. Does it match up with yours? The purpose of that exercise is to show that each one of us has our own interpretation of the different words that we use. The Course in Miracles says that words are symbols of symbols twice removed. So what that means is, well, for me, sometimes when I say stuff, somebody doesn't understand me, and I hope that doesn't happen here today. Can you imagine using words like, how would you describe God? Or how would you describe higher power or the universe? How would you get that across to somebody else? You know how you feel and what you know about it. So it's a journey beyond words. That's a book that I'm studying. A journey beyond words, and that's where I want to take you, and that was why I gave you the definition of patience. And thank you for the patience that you do have. So metaphors have been playing a big part in my life. And it's a mirror. I look at the world and I see it as a mirror. And everything I look at, I see as a reflection of who I am inside. So you guys are my mirrors, and I see you looking at me, and some of you, oh, there's love in your eyes. Some of you, not so much. Years ago, I saw a little girl so frightened that she fell down into a fetal position. And it was to keep herself from being hit, from being abused. And I've never seen anything like that until I remembered, until I saw inside of me that that's how I lived my whole life. That I lived in a fetal position. Am I popping? That's probably like popcorn. And so I stayed in a fetal position inside, and I was hiding. My wife warned me about this. I grew up hiding. That was another reflection from my mirrors. And 22 years ago, it's funny you mentioned that, but 22 years ago I came to what I call the end of the road, my rock bottom. And it was there that I was able to learn a new way of life reflections, which are my perceptions, began to change, as did my worldview. Here was another mirror. The Course in Miracles states that all my thoughts are based in my past, giving me the interpretations of everything I see from my past. But as I began to heal my past, the world around me changes. And I pictured my past as stories. Stories that I had to make up in order to make sense of the chaos going on around me. If I was hurt, I needed to make sense of why I was hurt. And so I would come up with stories, different stories about, who I was and why this was happening. For every event, I made stories, abusive or not. I had to make these situations make sense, and as such, my sister and I, raised in the same family, have different memories. And so that's why these stories that I made up, I found I was taught to believe. I was taught, I believe, that I was an unwanted person. I was an unlovable person. And I was an unforgivable person. I could never be good, and I always felt guilty. And this became my distorted mirror. And so the world I looked at was from that distorted mirror. Not that you guys were distorted, but that that's the image I saw. And then something wonderful happened. And I began to see my life was made up of those images and stories, the same stories I made up to make sense of my crazy life. I found these stories were not real, and neither was the images I made of myself. The Course teaches that there is only one problem, and there's only one solution. The one problem is our belief in separation, that we're separate from each other. And the only solution, the one solution, is forgiveness. And it's that simple. That's what the whole thing's about. A great example of this was my own mother, whom I blamed for the guilt and shame I experienced in my life. And then this miracle happened, and I saw her not as my abuser, but as a whole and holy child of God. The images I had of her were just that. They were just images, all this past stuff. She has gone on, and I carried this with me. I treated myself according to how I thought, or how I learned to treat myself. I had pictures in my mind that I'd been carrying all this time, and she was not the problem. She didn't even need to be forgiven. It was those stories I had, those things I created to make sense out of chaos, and that's what needed to be forgiven. And that's how I was able to forgive myself. And again, more reflections from the mirror. I found as I I forgive my stories, that I'm released from the past, and these reflections change. The Course says that forgiveness is the last illusion, and I really like that. Now, I've had dreams and visions over my lifespan, and they were gifts to me for myself. I didn't make them up. They're way above and beyond me. But I'd like to share with you in this evolution of this spiritual being, if you'll indulge me. A more recent one was while sitting on my sister's deck, I was watching the wind blow through the aspen tree. And when, in a moment, I saw the Holy Spirit blowing those leaves. The leaves were rustling, and there was a sound like paper chimes. And then I saw that the leaves were made up of the same stuff as the Holy Spirit itself, who blew those leaves. And thirdly, I looked up into the sky that was filled with clouds, and each one of the clouds was changing its shape. So I saw different airplanes, and fishes, and animals. And I was shown that they were like ink blot tests. Do you remember those? And psychologists would use ink blots for their clients to learn or to try and find about their patient's behavior, patterns. And I saw everything in my life was seen like those ink blots. And I interpreted them. And these were mirrored inside my consciousness. That's what those ink blots were. Another time, one of my favorite, was seeing our oneness as represented by the sun. And as the rays of the sun extend outward, they seem to be separated from each other. But they are entirely made of the same energy and substance as the sun. Each being a part of the whole, and that was its oneness. And the vision showed me all of us are the Christ of God, one with God, all made of the same stuff. And I have experienced that Christ in me. Another adventure my wife and I had was when we were shopping at Costco. And we were eating at their fabulous snack bar there. Just people watching. Just look, watching all around. And there were people from all walks of life. Some were rich, some were poor, some were crippled, one was blind. But all of them were different. And suddenly I said to Deb, there is the Christ of God. And in that instant we saw a flame burning in every one of these people. They may have been from different walks of life, but inside of them there was a light, a flame. And it didn't matter who they were. We were all doing the best we could with what we had. And all of us with that same flame. Now, both of us witnessed this phenomenon, and all of this happened while we were eating hot dogs. Now, where am I today? Some of you know recently I had open heart surgery. after that surgery, I suffered from terrifying torments, hallucinations. And worst of all, God was not to be found anywhere. He had abandoned me. Everything I believed about God collapsed all around me, and I lived in emptiness without him. And without me, there was nothing left inside. Now, I don't have a Catholic background, but I was given two saints as my new guides. One was St. John of the Cross, and the other was St. Lucia. St. John of the Cross is best known for his essay, The Dark Night of the Soul. He was in prison, thrown into solitary confinement, and his experience mirrored mine. That was only empty. There was only emptiness and darkness. And throughout his time there, he came to know God in a new way. Saint Lucia is considered as the patron saint of the blind. And even without her sight, she was a visionary leading people out of the darkness and into the light. Now, God, the God I had known prior to my operation, did not exist anymore. But there's a new God in town. A new God of my understanding, expressing himself in me, new vision for my sight, and God is my strength and vision. In closing, now, I'm supposed to quit trying to find my own way out of this darkness. I am to let him lead me by the way I do not want to go, into this shadow self. And by the vision he's given me to know this, I have to trust that the darkness is not real. I may think that there abides in me that which I don't understand at the time. But he quietly said to me, that which is profane is found holy. And what I meant for me was that my past, future fears and or hatred, I find to be, anything I find to be profane in me, is found holy. Not will be, but is. It all works together for good. Now, in closing, there's a biblical reference I'd like to quote from 1 Corinthians 13, verse 12, and it says, now we see but a poor reflection as in a mirror, and then we shall see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. So I want to end where we started at the beginning with the words from Richard Rohr. Success has very little to teach us in the spiritual life, but failures are great